Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, the impact of COVID-19 on your finances, but first, opening up Pennsylvania's economy. As they say, let's get to it.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
All right, we have a couple of really important topics to take up. Joining me first is Gene Barr. He's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. Gene Barr, as always, welcome.
Hey, good to see you again. Not virtually.
We're here. Yeah,
but
I like being here with
we're
this
protected. We're protected.
Plexiglass.
Exactly.
I point that out. When the governor was on, I pointed that out. All right, well, let's start with the economy. I mean, there's been this big debate going on. How quickly should the economy open, as you know,
right,
and what is the impact of it? So let's start, if you will, with bringing back PA initiative. Bringing PA back initiative. First of all, what is that?
Love to talk about that. So back in the spring, probably a month in, we realized, justifiably, that the state was fixated on the health issues, that is suppressing the surge. And so we sat down and said, we've got to start figuring out how we get this economy out of the ditch that we had to drive it into. So we pulled in some of our local chamber members. We pulled in statewide associations, including the hospital and the medical societies, and said, what do we need to do? So first it was an assessment of how bad it is, which areas are hit hardest, not surprisingly, restaurants, travel, lodging, et cetera, and said, how do we begin to bring Pennsylvania back? What do we do? And so we began to focus on those things that we need to do. How do we get building back up and running? How do we get restaurants back up? How do we get manufacturing? How do we protect the supply chain in Pennsylvania? And so recently what we've started to talk about is how we prepare if we do have this surge in the late fall, winter, about how we deal with it, because we now know more than we did back in the spring.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the other element is almost every day you pick up a paper or listen to a radio or watch TV, and this restaurant's closing for good. This operation is gone. I mean, and it's virtually every day we're seeing companies, particularly restaurants and bars and salons. I mean, it's remarkable in some respects how long they've managed to stay in business, and now we get winter, so you can't sit outside and eat coming up. Go ahead.
That's a problem, and what has sustained them to a large degree has been the payroll protection program out of the feds, and so there's still some there, but we don't know what's going to happen in another phase of a recovery out of D.C. They seem to be in a stalemate again down there over how we're going to proceed. But I worry like you do about what we're going to see with businesses, and more, particularly smaller ones, but actually those of all sizes, including major retailers, are having real issues here. And so we've got to figure out how we can continue to operate the economy while protecting people, doing things like we're doing sitting here today, putting up plexiglass barriers, wearing masks, doing distancing, sanitizing, doing the right things. I think we can keep this economy up and running, which is actually what the World Health Organization said we can do. Right. That's what we have to focus on.
Let's switch. I want to come back to that, but I want to talk about this question of immunity. I know that it's a big deal for physicians. I mean, how much immunity should be granted? And, every day you learn that somebody has COVID-19. I mean, look what happened to the president, just about everybody around him, and how difficult it really is to stay safe.
Let's talk, it's not immunity, it's what we call safe harbor. Immunity implies you can do whatever you want and still get some kind of protection. That's not true. Our view is this: if you as a business, a nonprofit, child care centers, which are incredibly impacted, and I've done some Zoom calls like we all have talking about this. Child care centers immediately come on the chat room. Please, whatever you do, I need this to reopen. And so what it says is if you do the right things, you follow CDC guidelines, you do your distancing, you do everything that a reasonable person would do, you should have some temporary safe harbor protections. We're seeing now some of my members have already been hit with 3 dozen or 4 dozen lawsuits over people saying, I got COVID in your facility. How do you prove or disprove that? So you could argue, well, they're frivolous, but at the same time, they have to defend them. And so our view is that we should give those protections. We're hoping to get it out of D.C. We're asking the governor to do it, and we're pushing the legislature to do it. To us, it's fair. We have more than 72 statewide associations that have asked for this safe harbor protection. We can't get 72 state associations to agree today's on whatever the day it is, let alone agree on an issue of this magnitude.
I understand. Yeah, well, I'll tell you something. I'm going to call it safe harbor, not limited immunity from now on.
Perfect. I love that. Safe harbor.
All right. We're going to run to a break. When we come back, let's talk about the leading policy issues in the state of Pennsylvania. And Gene Barr is my guest, and he's back for another segment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, my guest this segment is Gene Barr. He's the president of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, a frequent guest on the program. We're always delighted to have him. All right, Gene Barr, let's talk about, there are some pretty big policy issues before the legislature and the governor's office, and it goes without saying we have a progressive governor and a conservative legislature. I'm using those as descriptive,
Sure,
not pejoratively.
Mm-hmm.
And so what issues is the business community in big policy issues are you watching and promoting?
Well, I think the one that everyone's watching is what we're going to do about closing this budget gap. Of course, we passed a 5-month budget in June that now expires in November. So now
after the election, of course.
Exactly. So what do we do about that $4 to $5 billion that we're short? And why are we short? Well, all those times when people weren't buying things, when people weren't working, not paying PIT, companies weren't making money, that has caused a shortfall in dollars. So how we address that, particularly if the feds don't come through with any assistance, is going to be a real challenge and creates some real potential to do damage to this economy. So we're very much watching that. We have to figure out.
Is there a specific, obviously, I would expect the business community not to be wild about certain kinds of taxes. Sales tax would affect them, income tax would affect them. But we've got this huge deficit, and some of the programs that the state sponsors, and I think you would admit, are pretty essential.
Well, they are, and they've already funded education for the rest of the year as well as a few others. So that's
funding.
been taken care of.
Yeah.
That's been taken care of, not to the degree everyone wants. But we've got to focus on how we close that. In addition, we have an unemployment rate that's about 2 points higher than the national average.
Yeah.
Why is that? Well, I would argue that we closed down to a larger degree than many other states. So now we have to, I think, operate smartly in terms of how we move going forward, and we're going to make sure we do that. The governor has called for the legalization of recreational marijuana. We continue to have concerns because we still have concerns over, from the employer base, how the medical marijuana issue is impacting the workplace, and particularly for workers and for employers who say, I have a drug-free workplace, who are concerned, to go back to the liability issue that we talked about, concerned about liability, the guy driving the forklift, the guy driving the truck, the guy working on the natural gas site. All these things are crucially important for us to understand before we take that next step.
Yeah, in the polls that have been done, recreational marijuana is more popular than not popular. More Republicans oppose it than Democrats, as you might expect. And it looks like the Pennsylvania legislature is not going to move on recreational marijuana. Now, you follow the legislature.
Yeah.
Am I right about that?
Right now, that's what they've said. And again, I think it's because there are still significant issues that arise as part of it. And I know what certain of the proponents have said. That is, hey, we can get the criminals out of it. The reality is, we tax tobacco, we tax gasoline, and there are criminal elements that in many cases are still involved as part of that in terms of tax evasion. So that's always going to be there when you create those opportunities for that. It won't eliminate it. So we do continue to have concerns over how that's going to work. And again, as a policy issue, as I've said, this issue of safe harbor from a liability basis on COVID is extremely important. And it's temporary. This is not a long-term permanent change to Pennsylvania's legal climate.
Well, we've had a spike up in the virus in Pennsylvania. If I'm correct about this, something like 20 states have had a spike up. There's an argument that it's heavily in colleges and universities when the students have come back. But if indeed we get a cutback, a decline in COVID, I mean, it looks like Governor Wolf might be for doing more to open up the economy.
Yeah, we think so too. And keep in mind, while we've had more cases, what's called the positivity rate has stayed in an area that's deemed to be acceptable. And even Secretary Levine has acknowledged a lot of the increased cases we're seeing are due to increased testing. Doesn't mean it's the only reason. I think you're right. The virus is circulating. Kids went back to school. They went out into assemblies they shouldn't have done. So we're seeing that. And so I think you're right, though. We can manage this. Keep in mind, this was never about eliminating it. This was about suppressing the surge and preventing the healthcare system from being overwhelmed. So as we develop therapeutics, as we develop vaccines, that's a great opportunity to get this economy back up and running.
Yeah, I mean, and that's important not just in our state, but nationally as well. And I guess we're going to have to wait till we'll get the third quarter numbers out of Washington for gross domestic product. How many people are collecting unemployment compensation, right, and what is the actual unemployment rate?
Exactly. And the other thing we do have a concern over is this extra, these extra dollars paid for unemployment is acting as an incentive for people to stay home. We're finding, I've got members who say they just, at a time of 10% unemployment, they can't find people to take their jobs. And part of it, too, I would say, to go back to our other one, is linked to the fact we can't get child care facilities open, some of it because they're worried about liability. Therefore, we can't get parents to have a place to drop their kids off to get to work. Yeah. So we're having a whole bunch of problems wrapped up in this economic recovery.
Well, look, a couple of other subjects to talk about, but, it's called Out of Time.
Exactly.
But thanks for coming on.
Sure.
and providing us with your insights. All right, COVID-19 and your finances, we're going to talk about those coming up.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, we know certainly that there's a big impact of COVID-19 on your finances. Are you going to buy a car? Are you going to get a mortgage on a house? I mean, there's a lot of complicated subjects. We're going to simplify them. And joining me to do that is Ron Ferrance. He's the CEO of Glatco Credit Union. I think I got that right. And you're located in Spring Grove, Pennsylvania. Is that correct?
Sure is.
All right, Ron. Well, let's start with the impact of COVID-19 on so many areas of our economy. As you just heard Gene Barr get into some aspects of it. Go ahead and take it.
Okay, well, COVID has affected every aspect of everyone's lives, whether it was through direct loss of income or job, increasing prices at, the different outlets that we go for our food or our other essential services, or someone, God forbid, that's been affected, medically from it. It's really entered our lives unexpectedly and without warning, and being more of a community organization, credit unions are able to really service the membership that's been affected,
Right.
hands-on, because we know our members. It's like when you used to go into your old local store. Everyone knew. You're going to come in, you're going to buy this, your regular things. We know our members. We see them every week. They're our friends. They're our neighbors. We're really hands-on at the credit union.
Yeah. I mean, the finances are obviously related to unemployment. 2.8 million Pennsylvanians have filed for unemployment compensation. And is there any sign that you're seeing that the economy is getting a little better? I mean, obviously, President Trump talks about that all the time. And what's the evidence from your folks who deal with people every day, who want loans? I want to get to auto loans and home mortgages in a minute. But the fact of the matter is that is the economy sufficient? Is the economy on the way back?
Okay. Well, from what we've seen at Glatco Credit Union, we're a seg-based credit union. So we deal with special employers, groups, and we've been fortunate because most of our membership are essential workers, whether it be the paper mill, because you need
Sure.
paper for different things.
Sure.
So they've been pretty steady throughout. One thing that we've definitely seen is increase in savings.
All right, I want to get into auto and home mortgages, as I indicated before. But what's the current state of lending? Is it picked up as the economy has grown a bit?
Yeah, we've definitely seen an increase in lending over the last quarter and a half. People, they were confined to their homes seriously initially, and now as things have loosened up, they're out and they're getting the big ticket items that they need. And I think a lot of people with automobiles, there's a lot of good deals out there because of the inventories at the dealerships. And they have their floor plans and they don't want to keep it on and pay interest on their inventory. So there's a lot of good deals, and we're able to help our membership with lower rates because with the Fed having the rates so low, our loan rates are also lower because we don't have to have the higher deposit rates. We're able to pass that on to our membership.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to chat about these mortgage loans and auto loans that are very important in people's lives, and we'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
All right, let's get to it. I've been promoting mortgage loans and auto loans for most of the program, so now finally let's get to it. Let's talk about mortgage loans first.
Okay. So, well, I mean, obviously, owning a home is part of the American dream. And even in this the seller's market that's going on now with, real estate inventories, the credit unions are able to really help out our membership. We could do pre-approvals. The process to qualify for a mortgage isn't as stringent as a lot of the commercial banks because, again, we do know our membership. And a lot of the rates and the fees that you would see from other financial institutions are much lower. So in this environment where, there's, like I said earlier, there's a lot more savings and people might have a bigger down payment, home ownership, I think, is really getting within reach, even in what's going on now with the economy and COVID.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing about it is that interest rates are low, and that's another way to promote it. And you can talk about that if you want, but there's also something else, and that is delinquency in Pennsylvania increased by 5 basic points year over year.
Yeah.
So you've got two different aspects of it that are important.
Yeah. So you're right. The delinquency has risen slightly, but I think with everything shutting down and the job losses, to have only a 5 basis point increase, it's never good. But I think in relation to what's gone on with the economy, that it's positive.
Yeah.
And I think as we come out of this, the mortgage portfolios are going to get stronger, and as a result, we're not going to have to reserve what we're reserving, which is going to put a lot more money out onto the street for people to borrow.
When we come to auto loans early on in COVID-19, the sales were down, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong. I think that more people are buying used cars than new cars in this current environment. Obviously, it has to do with the money that the financing of them.
Yeah. So you're right. There are a lot more used car sales, and it's causing even at the auctions, the price of those cars to rise. And I think we'll eventually see where new car sales come back, because as the prices come up, when the inventories drop, the new car sales will pick up as well. I think people are being a lot more conservative with their money, with the uncertainty that's going on, and the really big ticket items that they might have bought, like a brand new car, they're going a step down and getting a reasonable, dependable used car, just to make sure that they have that cash reserve in case something happens.
Yeah, I mean, but the fact of the matter is, our sales of cars going up now that dropped sharply. Are we seeing a rise in automobile loans?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. 3 of our last 4 months were some of the biggest months that we've had in auto lending at the credit union. So we really have seen that increase in people going out and getting that vehicle. It dropped off a little bit last month, but historically in September, with school and things of that nature going on, lending does drop down a little bit. And I think it's more related to that cycle than anything with the economy.
All right. There's another, look, every one of us virtually every day use, what are they called? Credit cards. How could I forget that? Credit cards. And what are the trends in credit cards right now?
So we've seen about a 10% increase in our outstanding balances. And with all of a lot of people with them being at home, they've done a lot of home improvement projects and things like that. So I think that our increase in our outstanding card balances are tied to that more than people taking on more debt, because they really are being a little more conservative in their spending. And I think that anything that's gone along with that increase has been to improve their lives, since we're sheltering at home basically. So you want to make sure your house is a little nicer if you wanted to get a new TV for when you're in, things of that nature.
But we've talked about this before, the significance of making sure that you keep the credit card balances low and that you don't get in over your head. That's pretty easy to do with a credit card. Oh,
absolutely. Absolutely. You go out and if you're not careful, when you're out spending, that bill comes and maybe you don't have the money to pay it off. You pay the minimum payment and it just kind of, it snowballs into something bigger. And that's why, as a credit union, we're here to financially counsel our membership, and we watch out for those things. If someone comes in to apply for a loan, we look at their credit report.
All right, I hate to cut you off, but we're out of time. Thanks for coming on. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. Stay well.